on the ground. I'm not coming down. I want to go higher, higher, higher than that.
Welcome back to the Business is Human podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Fleetwood Hession, and we're here to bring you episodes that blend meaningful work with profitable success. Here to steward what I call the age of humanity. I believe if we transform the way we work, we can transform the way that we live. As always, my friendly request, if you like what you hear, hit subscribe so you don't miss any episode, and leave a review to tell the other humans that they might like it too. Always looking to help you and connect with others. All right, let's get into it, shall we?
And the problem with not having focus for the first phase of your career, that is to say, the problem with allowing yourself to have myriad interests professionally and other, is it chips away at the probability of you being comfortable financially enough to satisfy your base needs. And so what I would like to posit is that people really, in fact, do focus on the thing that they like the most or hate the least, that has the highest probability of providing financial security for them, and focus solely on that thing until they are comfortable they have financial security before they begin to have myriad interests. Once they have myriad interests or they start imagining it, they sure as heck better make sure they understand how to scale themselves, which almost always involves delegating to elevate. Delegating to elevate usually comes with nurturing people earlier on in their careers, empowering them with skills, elevating you to bestow wisdom, and then divert your attention to other things. And if you want to continue to do that, you're going to have to create organizations, if you will, along the way that have people you've empowered, delegated. And so it's a constant process. And so I just wanted to, because I talk to a lot of younger people who are like, oh, well, you do so cool, and you do finance and music and restaurants and all this cool stuff. Like, I want to do that. I'm like, no, you can't do it. I didn't start doing it till I was 42 years old. Prior to that, I was a finance bro.
That's just the start of an inspiring conversation with David Steele, founder and CEO of One Wealth Advisors, which is an independent RIA firm handling over $1 billion in assets. He's also opened 7 restaurants in 7 years in a very competitive area, the Bay Area, and also has a host of yoga studios, and he's an artist and a philanthropist and really just an amazing human. And so I took notes again in this conversation for myself because it is a very inspired conversation. And as we talk on this show about business being human, I believe David represents the kind of approach that we can all take notes from in how we lead our team, our business, our life. Can't wait for you to hear this. Here we go. David Steele, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I am excited about this conversation for a variety of reasons, but mostly because I feel like in the short time that we've already had this discussion that we could go almost anywhere with this conversation. And so we're just going to let what I believe the Lord in running conversation, just going to let him drive today. I'm going to ask you some questions and we're just going to see where it goes. But I'm going to do a little bit of a setup for our listeners today because Business is Human is really built on the idea that our human needs and our business needs are different, and our best chance at success is when we know how to fuse those together. But one of the things I like to talk about is the history of work and how it's evolved. And, back in the agricultural age, farms were about shared food source and how can we work together to survive. And then we got broken up into this industrial age model, which is a kind of a fragmented view of work. And now we're coming back to what I call the age of humanity, where it is more about people serving people as our fundamental needs to fill our soul. And what I'm hearing from you is that your career is about how can you serve people. And that sounds fundamental, but we have a lot of people out today that it's a very money first kind of vibe. And even though you're a wealth advisor and have worked in finance, what I heard from you immediately was, no, it's really about people. Can you share with our listeners a little of that context for you and why you're so passionate about it being a community first or a people first approach?
If there's anything we do that is not about in the service of others, it's not going to make us happy. It's not going to be ultimately satisfying. And the more we allow ourselves to focus on anything that isn't primarily in the service of others, we'll fill our lives with the wrong motivations, in my mind, the wrong mental framing, and we run the risk of being unhappy. I find it very simple.
And is that something that has always been a part of your view, or has that evolved based on some challenges or some pains? How do you land on that so passionately and with conviction today?
Well, I give my credit to my mother, who I'd like to think raised me pretty well, single mom, 2 kids. And I always think she had really good values oriented around being in the service of others. She was a school teacher, and just her nature was to always try to be a loving, wonderful friend and family member to everybody. So I had really good patterning from her. And before you hit record on this podcast, we talked a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I do think that it's probably challenging and maybe impossible and maybe not necessary to be primarily focused on the service of others professionally if we're not certain that we're going to have our base needs of food and shelter taken care of. Ideally, people, I think, pursue professional endeavors that are both high probability of satisfying your base needs financially and happens to be in the service of others. But I'll tell you, I got out of college, my undergraduate degree, and my career path I chose based on, we had grown up relatively poor, and I didn't want to be poor. I hated the feeling. And so I went to the library and opened a book when those were in libraries and looked for the highest paying job with a 4-year degree. It said it was a stockbroker. And so I went and got a job at 44 Wall Street at a little regional brokerage firm and did really well. I was a persuasive salesperson. I was able to convince people for whatever reason that a 24-year-old knew what he was doing, which I didn't, but I convinced people I did, and made money, but was miserable. And so all of a sudden I had my base needs taken care of, but I was really unhappy. And I don't know if it was how I was raised by my mother or if I was lucky that it was in my nature. I had quickly realized that because I wasn't adding value to people's lives, yet I was making money, there was a disharmony inside of me. And so I actually contemplated leaving that industry because what is now relatively common, we call financial planning or wealth management, which is not the sales of investment securities or financial products. It's really becoming a trusted advisor to people where you're a legal fiduciary. It's a very high bar. If you are a legal fiduciary and you're an advisor in this capacity, you're adding value to people's lives, I think by definition. And so I took about a 75% pay cut when I pivoted from being a financial product salesperson or stockbroker to more of a trusted family financial advisor. And I was happy. I was really happy. Now, I didn't have a family at the time. I still don't have a family, but I didn't have kids. I didn't have a spouse who was dependent upon me. So it was really easy for me to make the decision to take the pay cut. So the timing was really good. I feel very blessed that I was able to arrive at that realization at such an early start a portion of my career.
It's an important one because before we hit record, I was asking you about the diversity of your business portfolio now. So you've obviously been very successful in this advising part of finance because your firm is now at about a $1 billion in asset firm where you're out helping people. But I think that also speaks to the fact that the more that you help people in an honest, transparent way, that wealth is more available to you oftentimes in a way that does feel good. But then you've added restaurants and yoga studio and philanthropy. And now that your basic needs are met, you're able to really tap into that creativity and the diversification. But what advice do you have for those people that are saying, oh, I love that he's doing all of these different things because you have a very specific guidance on that for people. How did you get to this point of having such diversity in your life and your business?
I was a boring finance advisor from the age of 24 until the age of 42. I had worked in restaurants all through high school and college. I knew I wanted to eventually open a restaurant, but I didn't want to do so until I knew I had financial security. And I opened my first restaurant at 42. It did really, really well. It turns out I have a restaurant company. We have 7 restaurants in the consumer packaged goods business. I'm executive chairman of the company. And I've since opened a chain of yoga studios and do all of this other stuff. But the point of your question is I did nothing other than being a financial advisor from 24 to 42. And by doing that, it afforded me the ability to secure my financial future with almost 100% certainty, where I didn't have to worry about it. I had built that practice with my brother, who was my first hire in that business. He's 6 years younger than I am. And so I hired him 6 years after I started in the business. And he and I built business the right way, one client at a time, slow and steady, very patiently. And then I had this relative comfort, and I went to him and I said, hey, I want to try to scratch this itch. He was a chef in college. So we both worked in restaurants all through high school and college. So he had some empathy for me. And I went to, I guess, 75% time in the financial advisory business and opened my first restaurant. And it succeeded radically. But had it not, I'm not sure I would have had the confidence to do all these other things. But because that was successful, I started to figure out how to scale myself. That is, to build teams and delegate responsibility and oversee the delegation and coach, but not do all of the tasks. That model then afforded me the ability to then repeat it in other businesses as well, beyond just what was then a financial planning company. It was very successful with a 12-person team, and a restaurant company that's now a 250-person team, and a yoga studio company that has 6 yoga studios, and a music festival company, and so forth. And these are all different organizations, but really I'm applying the same approach, which is organize people around a central idea, coach, delegate, nurture, and scale.
What you're describing from a nervous system perspective is really honoring, because you can't tap into that creative place in your nervous system unless your basic needs are met, that you have that sense of safety, you have that sense of love and connection, that you're going to be okay. Then you can start to connect with others in a meaningful way. And I love that you've done this as a practice, because now, like you said, you can apply this to yoga studios, music festivals, restaurants. You have this kind of framework that you've built. And the other thing that I love about what you said is that it sounds like it's very much based on connection versus control when it comes to people. Because I run into clients and folks that I interview that have this sense they have to do it all. They have to control it all. And that's a tough way to grow. But it sounds like you've figured out how to hire the right people and put the right systems and processes in place. What advice would you give people that are thinking about, you know what, I now have a decent amount of wealth. I do want to go out and maybe explore some of this diversification. How have you been successful in hiring the right people and creating those connections with people and for people?
Well, I have a saying, and any of the people in my sphere that happen to listen to this podcast are going to laugh because they've heard me say this so many times, but I call the disease of non-personal scalability is the following statement: if you want something done right, do it yourself. So much narcissism in that idea. It's a shame. I mean, as you were talking about my model, if you will, my playbook for organization building, where I'm at now is really trying, and I've just begun thinking this way, is really my partners in my business. I'm really trying to push them, for them to do with others what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying they need to go start other businesses, but they can, in fact, teach this idea. And maybe it's hiring. It probably is hiring. I probably have not hired people who want or need the credit for the creation. I don't care to have credit for the things I've been involved in creating. I like to be known as somebody who was a co-founder of stuff. That's cool. That feels good for my ego, but I don't have a need to be the person who did it. And so I think I've probably done a good job of hiring and eventually elevating and making partner people who like sharing the credit and like sharing responsibility and the symbiosis of specialization of their particular area of focus, and like delegating and coaching and nurturing and developing people.
Yeah. Well, it's all of those skills that, well, I worked for the last 30 plus years teaching people and helping people understand the importance of those skills, when too often it gets focused that those are the soft skills, when in fact, those are the things that matter most. Your ability to coach and nurture, and it doesn't really matter who gets the credit, but let's work together to make sure we're serving a client. And you said this about the financial advisement business, it was one client at a time. And it sounds like you build from let's make sure we have the core really well done, and then we'll start layering on more and more and more as we can, versus approaching things with the bigger is better mindset.
One of the great things we can do as human beings is really resist envy and FOMO and comparing ourselves to others, especially in this day and age, with us only really being exposed to the rare, radical short-term success stories, or at least what we see of these success stories, it feels like it was overnight successes. The reason companies go bankrupt is they borrow money. The reason individuals fail in endeavors often is because there's almost like an emotional debt they're acquiring, where they're saying, I have to achieve this thing in this certain period of time. And what they do is they basically made commitments to themselves and the other people that are involved in the pursuit. And I think if we would just change our expectations, I mean, some of this is spend less than you make. And if you're always spending less than you make, then you can make the right decision in the name of long-term sustainability rather than short-term reward that may be inconsistent with this ideal you're pursuing.
You talk about the Wall Street to Main Street view of things. And I have shifted from working predominantly with large organizations previously to more of the small to mid-size business as a coach and a consultant. And I thoroughly enjoy that, because I believe that the 3-month result expectation in the publicly traded market really creates an unrealistic expectation, or it just doesn't allow for some of the natural maturation that needs to take place. Thoughts about that?
I completely agree. When I do some business consulting, and I always tell the entrepreneur, if you cook a chicken at 1,000 degrees, it's going to burn and not taste good. And if you cook a chicken at 100 degrees, it's never going to cook. But if you cook a chicken at 375, when exactly is it going to be done? Well, you got to test it. Mm-hmm. And it'll be done when it's done. And when it's done, it's delicious. And so cook your chicken at 375, not too much, not too little, and accept the fact that it's going to be done when it's done.
Oh, that is so good. We happen to be recording during Thanksgiving week, so if we could just...
Yeah, that's right. We can change for turkey. Yeah.
Wow. David, we can dig into that metaphor for so many business lessons. What's the quality of the chicken? What's the nature of the oven? Was it, is it on its last leg, or is it the one that your grandmother's had for 1,000,000 years and it's going to go for 1,000,000 more? And is it really 375, or is it, have you tested? Like, there are so many elements to success that people want to either ignore or shortcut, and you're just not going to get the sustainability and the enjoyment out of the process.
But, some businesses have a high probability of success and require low capital. Those are service businesses. Some have low capital requirements and almost no probability of success. Those are usually artists, right? I mean, it's just unfortunately, for every Banksy, there's quite literally millions of artists that think they are as good as Banksy and going to be as successful or at least successful enough. That's a low probability business. Doing financial advisory work is such a wonderful business because it has a high probability of success if it's one client at a time. And again, it's low capital required to start the business. So I do think there's something to be said about which endeavor you pursue and if there's a lot of success stories out there for you to have a playbook to execute on. So I want to make sure we caution people against applying this sort of one client at a time, low and slow, be patient mentality around a low probability business, because unfortunately, I will not be president of the United States or a professional quarterback of an NFL team. And had I tried to be either, I would almost certainly have been disappointed.
So how would you advise someone who's thinking about either adding on some exploration of new businesses now that their wealth is in a good place for them, or that person that's in that early to mid career that wants to make sure that they are doing the work that is best suited for their highest degree of success, however they frame that? How do you know that you're moving in the right direction?
Well, I want to distinguish wealth from income. For example, I do have personally, my wealth is strong. A lot of it is illiquid. The businesses I start, I've always tried to build generational businesses that could be sold, but I choose not to sell them and they're private. So there's no place for me to sell my stock, if you will. But I have really strong income because I have set up what I call generational businesses. The cash flow is really strong and it affords me to, I mean, let's face it, you can have a strong income and as long as your expenses are lower than it, and if the income is reliably sustainable, you actually don't really have to have wealth, which is a big distinction. And if you're never going to retire, you actually don't really even have to have wealth for retirement. Like I never want to retire. I love what I do. And fortunately, what I do, I think, is I'm able to do until I lose my wits, I probably. Clarifying, because you had said when somebody's wealth gets to a certain point, we use a rule of 4%. So if you need $200,000 a year to live on, then you probably have to have accumulated wealth of $5 million or something like that to eliminate income, that is quit your job, to have enough income from your investment portfolio to then pursue being a visual artist or being a consultant or whatever the heck you want to then pursue. If you have a job that pays you that $200,000 and that's enough to live on, and you can go part-time or do something else as a side hustle, that works as well. So I do want to distinguish wealth from income, and they can harmonize and they can work together, or they can be instead of each other.
That's a great distinction. I'm glad that you brought that. Take that step and say, okay, so if it is more about exploring something that you're curious about, so you don't have to quit the job that you're in, there may be something else that you want to explore. How would you advise that person?
Well, that brings me to a thing I often talk about, which is the constraints of binary thinking. And I think humans, we've created a lot of stuff that are binaries. I think it's not shocking that we have Democrats and Republicans.
Don't get me started. We can go down a whole biblical thing about factions, and I can go crazy with that school is not supposed to be divided into grades. And don't push that button on me, David. We don't have time for that.
Well, I'll push the button.
I agree.
I'll push the button to say, why do we have God and devil? So, right. I mean, these are the, why are men privileged over women in society? There's privileging that happens in that binary. And so I have my master's in postmodern literary theory with a focus on deconstructionism, which is this idea of trying to point out in society, in our human experience, the fictional manufactured creation of binaries by humanity, and to shine a light on the synthetic nature of those binaries, the non-sacred nature of those binaries. So then I get often asked, I live in New York, San Francisco, and Tahoe. Well, where's your primary residence? Why do I have to have one? People just can't wrap their heads around it. Yeah, but where's your home? What do you mean? They just can't wrap their heads around
Do you think
it.
that's part of safety, that people feel safer if they can honor the way that this binary thinking has been socialized?
Yes.
So it's not a real thing. It's just something we've created, a construct that makes us feel safe, even though it's not real.
I think it works for some people. I mean, let's face it, it works for people in marriages, right? You have a spouse and there's one spouse. I mean, there's alternative ways of doing that in this day and age. But, I mean, I think there is a safety to that concept. I mean, it's inarguable biologically that we have children, right? I mean, but it is not necessarily that it's, a husband and a wife and 2.2 kids. Or I have no problem with people choosing that. And there is a comfort in the normalization of that societally and culturally. I'm not at all saying anything negative about that construct. I think that's a human creation as well. Okay, so where am I going with this? Job. David, what is your job? Oh, so restaurants are your passion project. No, I'm really passionate about financial advisory. Like really passionate about it. No more or less so than restaurants or music festivals or yoga studios. People just want me to say, okay, you have your day job, but then you have your passion stuff. And I reject that as well. And I believe people go there because of this restriction of binary thinking.
Coming down. I never left it on the ground.
I love a good connection. And I recently met a founder. Her name is Paige McFeely, and her company is called Base. And what I love about her work is, business is human, and the humans running your business need support. But the support that everyone needs is going to look very different because we're all unique down to our fingerprints. So some people need help with an overloaded calendar or an overflowing inbox, invoicing expenses, personal appointments, social media. It could be anything. And finding the right virtual executive assistant can help with all of that. And that's what Base does. They're the expert in finding you not just an EA, but the right EA to ensure that the partnership is a success. They've been trusted for over 10 years. They have a proven track record and a highly skilled pool of US-based EAs experienced in a range of areas. So getting started with an EA might feel overwhelming. So Base offers these resets for just $750. An executive assistant will come and clean up they won't come there, it's virtual. They'll clean up your email, your calendar, and no commitments, just results. And as a special offer, they're giving you buy one, get one free resets. So get one for yourself and then give one to a friend, a coworker, your boss, your spouse. And then if you decide to continue working with Base to actually have a partnership with an executive assistant, they'll give you exclusive bonuses, making it even more rewarding for you and your friend. Mention my name, Rebecca Fleetwood Hession, or Business is Human podcast to get your BOGO and all the special treatment that comes with it. All right, let me know how it goes. And I think the industrial age model of work and school and life has exacerbated that. We like to think about things in business in terms of, an org chart and very linear. And oftentimes the answer is in something far more organic if we allow ourselves to go there.
Yeah, it's interesting because my financial planning company grew so rapidly in about a 4 or 5 year period of time. My brother and I woke up and we were like, heck, we started as a 5-person business. At its core, when it was really humming, it was a 5-person business. And next thing you know, we woke up, we were at 12 and quintupled our assets under management, our client base. And we were on a path to being, on our way to being a 50-person company. We were staring at it and we just stopped. We said, that's not who we want to be, because at that point in time, we would no longer be doing what we're doing. What I mean, I am both CEO of a company, One Wealth Advisors. I'm also an advisor to about 75 clients. My brother is chief operating officer. He really runs the company more than anybody does. And he's an advisor probably to 70 or 80 clients as well. And we wear many hats. We love wearing many hats. And when you have a small business, you get to wear many hats. That's fun. It's really dynamic. And as you grow organizationally, you go from one person doing 10 people's jobs to 5 people doing 3 people's jobs each to one person doing one person's job to one person running a division of 5 people doing one part of the business. And next thing you know, you wake up one day and it's not what you had. And you have to be very careful about that. When you have a lot of success, it's really, I think, natural to just assume that you have to just keep going, keep growing. We are growing. We grew 32% year over year in that company. But how we bring clients on, who, frankly, we accept and onboard as clients has changed. And we've been very judicious about developing mastery within the team to allow us to not grow headcount as rapidly and still grow the business. What I'm arguing for is being thoughtful about it.
What are some of the ways that you feel your way through that? Because it's less of a, when we get to this amount of money, we'll hire this many people in this role and they'll do these things, which is kind of a traditional corporate growth plan. What is it that you and your brother do differently where you are able to sense that, hold on, are we taking this thing where we want to go? How should we do it differently? What do you think it is between you two that allows you to sense that shift?
I don't know. I mean, I just think we looked at our day, week, month, quarter, and what we were spending our time doing, and it became more and more managing people and developing people, coaching people, meetings. And it's fine. You have to have meetings. I mean, you have to be organized and yeah, but there was just, it became a bit too much of that and less spending time with the client, less spending time with the whole group of the team and being broken into divisions of the team. And so now divisions were fiefdoms. And so we just, I don't know, we just felt it.
And I was hoping that would be your answer, because when I'm coaching with clients and they're talking about their plans and their growth plans, their companies and the sales figures and the sales goals, I say, well, how do you want to spend your days? Let's build a business that you enjoy working in, because why bother? You get paid, twice a month. You go to work every day. What do you want to be doing? What is it that really gives you a sense of feeding your soul? And let's make sure you build a business that does that. And if at any point that you feel off, let's pause and look around and say, okay, did we accidentally get to a place that we're not really that aligned with our soul in this work? I don't think that's an unrealistic way to do business. I don't think that's airy-fairy Instagram woo. I think we have a really strong internal guidance system that we have dialed back a little too much to live in societal norms.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. My restaurant company, when we opened the first restaurant, I knew every person's name. And the truth is, it's a much lower margin, higher capital cost business. Dare I say it's a less good business. I love it. I'm thrilled I went down the path, but it's a more challenging business. And my partners in that business, the executive team, to be blunt, make less money than my partners in my financial planning company do. Why? It's a less good business. We had to scale it. We had to grow it. We're at 250 employees and I know about 30 of their names. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's the genie's out of the bottle and there was no way around it, because in order for my partners, and my team in that company has been together for 15, 16 years now. We're still together. We basically, most of us have been together for over a decade. The executive team, it's a great partnership, and we can go on and on about that. We can go down a rabbit hole about that story also and why I think that is. But the point is that we just had to grow it to a point where it wasn't what we had before. And we were forced to, because the reality of what we talked about earlier, which is the hierarchy of needs and financial security. The people I started that business with, they deserve to have financial security as well. We had to grow to get them there. And we're not, frankly, there yet. As big as and successful as we are, we're still pursuing that goal for them.
That's a long time to be with the same core executive team in that industry, isn't it?
It is. I'm very proud of that.
So what is that?
Well, first and foremost, I am a very interesting Philosophically, I am what I call a socialistic capitalist. I own 20% of that company. I started it. And the person I hired, who was 24 at the time, Chef Tom, who's now the CEO of the company, is 40. He owns more than I do, and I started the company. The point I was trying to make is that I've always believed deeply in an ownership of my companies across the executive teams. So keeping people together, you do have to follow the money. And as a founder, I am very willing to make a financial sacrifice in the name of having my team members feel the generosity, not so they feel good about me, but so they feel good about what we're building together and they don't feel resentful. And that's a bit of a fine balance, but I would rather over-index on that than under-index. And that is my primary reason I'd say this is the primary reason why I've been able to keep my teams together for as long as I have. And that's across all of my businesses that I'm involved with there. There's just teams that have been together for a very, very long time. There's also, I believe, base motivation for human beings is they want to feel valued. And if human beings, if I know that as a founder, then everything I do has to have some aspect of it making the person I'm involved with feel valued. And you can do that through giving them agency and equity, through creation, intra-company creation, decisions that are made. You can do that with investors who invest in your businesses and making them feel valued by communicating with them. It goes back to what we talked about originally. It's always about people and being in the service of people.
That couldn't be a better illustration of business as human if I tried. The way that are they safe? Are they financially able to care for themselves? Do they have agency? Do they know their value? Is their value being utilized in the company for decisions? Such a beautiful illustration of what I hope is the future of business, that we can look at it through the lens of humanity, not just the money making as the goal. Make money, but so people can feel safe, so people can have the best life for themselves.
It's not a zero-sum game. My philosophy in life is that of abundance and not scarcity. When I'm negotiating, I'm not trying to win the negotiation. I'm trying to create a result that is mutually beneficial, and I'm willing to, quote unquote, lose the negotiation, not by a lot, but I'm willing to lose the negotiation by a little. I have a philosophy with friendships where I say I am willing to do 75% of the work in a friendship, not 100, not more than 75, but 75. Why? We're emotional creatures. We never really can judge 50-50. We can probably judge 75, but we can't judge 50-50. So if I give myself room to go to 75 and I'm prepared for that, that's my expectation, I'll know who are the people in my life there's equanimity in the relationship.
Oh, that's so good. I want you to package that up as a message that you put out to the world on a regular basis. That's a beautiful way to see that. And boy, it sure flies in the face of a lot of the things we talked about earlier about binary thinking. And I spent about 20 years working for the Franklin Covey organization, and I had the blessing to work directly with Dr. Stephen R. Covey for a few projects and on some things. And he volunteered to facilitate win-win agreements and helping people facilitate a lot of what you're talking about with Democrats and Republicans against a particular issue, with people who were very much staunchly committed to that binary thinking. And he said, let's just have a conversation. I will come and facilitate this. And the unwillingness to do so was the problem. It wasn't that it couldn't be done. It was their unwillingness to do what you're talking about, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to invest more than 50%. I'm going to go all in just to see if we can come up with some sort of symbiotic relationship. And the fact that you enter into your business relationships like that as a standard has answered my question about why do you have a restaurant executive team that's still together for 20 years in an industry that's typically pretty transactional. So I think you've just articulated that.
Well, the alternative to it is dehumanizing the person you're in negotiation with.
And some people are willing to do that.
We see them in the press every day.
So that's some takeaway that anybody in any business situation, relationship, personal or business, quite frankly, if you're willing to go 75%, that can make all the difference in the world.
Well, I'm not married, but my goodness, I think if I was and I took that approach to my spouse, the probability of a successful marriage may be higher. I mean, if that was your attitude with your spouse or your child or really anybody, because you're just not capable of judging 50-50. I don't think we're capable of it.
It wouldn't be a shared 50-50, right? My idea 50-50 and your idea 50-50 is going to be different already. So we're already coming out of the box with discrepancy. I do this funny little exercise with teams sometimes where I'll say, hey, I'm going to give you a word. I want you to write down as many words that word association you think of when you hear this word. And I'll use a word that's usually industry specific for them, healthcare or whatever. And I'll say, how many, 5 or 6 people around a table, how many of these words do you think are going to match? And they'll forecast, 4 or 5. Yeah, we're in healthcare. We get it. I'm like, okay. And it's always 0. But occasionally it's 1 match. And then I'll say, okay, maybe that word's a little too squishy. Let's use a common everyday word like dog or cat. And then we do the same exercise, 0 every time. And what I think is fascinating about this is we all want to be known for our uniqueness. We all want to be known for our authenticity. We want everybody to know that we're different until we get in a room together, until we get around a table, and then we're so damn mad that we're different.
Well, can I change your word different to special?
Yes, absolutely. I often use unique, and I use the term not wrong, just different a lot of times too. And it's fascinating to me that we don't come into a relationship or a team assuming that we're not going to see it similarly. We're not supposed to be seeing it similarly. So to be able to say it, and because of that, I'm willing to go in 75% to make sure that we can all win.
But the 75% for me is an internal thing. I don't ever tell somebody,
Sure,
hey, I'm willing to do 75% of the work, although plenty of the people in my sphere have heard me say that because it's a philosophy of mine. But when I'm in a relationship with somebody, friendship, professional, whatever, I don't let them know, hey, by the way, I'm keeping score. I'm looking for 7.
Right, because that takes away the whole...
It's a mental framing to give myself a release valve when I'm disappointed in somebody.
Say more about that.
If somebody is doing 26% of the work, inevitably, I can easily say, all right, well, they didn't do this or that. I'm not asking them to do all of those things because my expectations are not that they're going to meet me halfway. And so it allows me to bite my tongue when I otherwise would feel like I have to advocate for myself in this instance. People can take advantage of you. That is unfortunately a thing in this world. And so you unfortunately have to advocate for yourself. And if a relationship is violating this framing of equanimity that I or whatever somebody chooses to create, you have to end the relationship. You have to be bold and end the relationship. And that unfortunately happens for all of us. And so many of us stay in relationships that aren't serving us. And maybe we're not serving them. The relationship isn't serving either of us. But we're afraid. The emotional attachment is so strong subconsciously that you're just afraid of breaking it, of disrupting it.
Then just gives us bitterness and all kinds of things that bleed over into other parts of our lives that we're not paying attention to. I can remember when my daughter was in 6th grade. She says to me one day, so-and-so, can't even remember the boy's name, wants to know if I'll be his girlfriend. Do I say yes? And I said, I don't know. Are you going to be strong enough to break up if it ever becomes a no? Because to me, if you're willing to be entering into a relationship, you have to only do that if you know you're strong enough to say, I want out of the streets.
She's going to, I don't know how old she is now, but I have to imagine she's brought that nugget with her through life. And so that's a good one.
She's 23 now. So she's still figuring out all the nuances, because just because mom gives good advice doesn't mean you don't have to go live some that experience is on your own to learn really how it works. So that's
Well,
where
let me tell you a story that I think you'll appreciate. A few years ago, for my mother's birthday, I did not send her a card or a gift, which is unusual, or anything. And I called her on her birthday. I began the call without saying happy birthday to her, not a word. And she inevitably asked me how I'm doing. And I went on this narcissistic sounding spiel about how all of my businesses were doing so well, and my financial planning company was flourishing, and the team was happy and together, and clients were happy, and my restaurant company was flourishing. And I just went on and on about me. And after a little while, I stopped and I said, "Hey, Mom, everything I've built is because you taught me the importance of people and relationships. And I wouldn't have this if not for what you taught me. Happy birthday." And so I share that with you because of that nugget you just gave your daughter. She's 23. It's coming.
That's beautiful. There's no place to go after that. That's mic drop moment. Relationships, that's the bottom line, right? So it doesn't matter what business you're in, enter into any business or anything as a relationship. Okay, well, why don't you just come back every few months and we'll just have an inspired discussion about whatever's on your mind. I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and I know our listeners will too. How can people stay connected to you in some way? I know you've got some social media handles. Where do you hang out?
I created because I do all these different things and it's confusing. I created this website, davidsteele.xyz, DavidSteele.xyz. And that has all of the stuff I'm involved with. And so that's probably the best place to connect with me.
And it's a beautiful site. I say that because as somebody in business that marketing is a necessary part of, you've done a beautiful job of putting all different types of things in there in this cohesive, beautiful, flowy kind of way. So I don't know if I did that for you, but it's really good.
My web guy, Charlie Villard, did it. And he's been doing all of my web stuff for most of my businesses for a very long time now. And we're still together.
He knows you. You can tell that. As it's somebody that you hired from a Google ad. You can tell that he knows. That's good. That's another beautiful illustration. Thank you so much. All right. I hope you and yours have a beautiful holiday season. And I'll look forward to having you back.
I look forward to it.
Thanks, David.
I'm not coming down. I never liked it on the ground. I'm not coming down.
Thanks for being here. You can follow us on Instagram, Business is Human, or TikTok, Rebecca Fleetwood Hession. It's a great way to share some of the clips with your colleagues and friends. All right. Make it a great day. Love you, mean it.